We seem to have plenty of speed in our lives these days, but how can we lead with speed? That's our topic today. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is sponsored by From Manager to Remarkable Leader, Kevin's flagship workshop based on his proven leadership model. Learn more at remarkablepodcast.com/manager. And now here's your host, Kevin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Excited to have our guest today. If you're watching, you can see him. You even have a hint about what we're going to talk about if you take a look at him. But for those of you that aren't watching, let me tell you about our guest. Our guest today's name is Alan Willett. He is an author, consultant, speaker, and expert at enabling leaders, teams, and organizations to take control of the accelerator of speed. He works with clients around the world, including the UK, Turkey, South Africa, China, India, Canada, and Mexico, and of course throughout the United States. He's consulted for HP, Oracle, Microsoft, NASA, General Motors, Intuit, OnStar, Cornell, Rutgers, and many others. He is the author of a brand new book, Lead with Speed, Fire Up Your Team, Power Your Engines of Development, and Make Your Organization Soar. Alan's passionate work has focused on leadership with a laser focus on the unique challenges of leading in this elevated pressure environments of high-tech development. Speed is our topic. Our guest today is Alan Willett. Alan, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thrilled to be here. Let's have fun.
So we're going to have some fun. So first of all, tell us a little bit about your journey that led you to where you're at today. Just real quickly, give us the thumbnail of the Alan journey.
Okay, thumbnail of the Alan journey. I started out on a dairy farm. Now, this is a little bit relevant because dairy farms, family dairy farms, have been beat up over the decades and going out of business. My father had a dairy farm when I was young that was always winning Dairy Farm of the Year. And I was wondering why about that. And when I finally got into business, I realized why. Because my dairy farm, my father's dairy farm, always ran with data. He knew how much cows produced per cow, how much food they ate, how much crops it cost to plant the fields, how much the fields yielded, etc. Nobody else was using data. My dad was using computers before anybody else was in that industry. And when I got into the world of high tech, I found that a lot of the companies were not using data. The ones that were successful were. They were driven and understood what speed was. They could measure it. They knew what it was, etc. So my journey started out with dairy farm, but I really learned a lot from that went throughout my career. From there, I went to college at Rochester Institute of Technology. I did a lot of work at Xerox Corporation when it was in its heyday. I led a group of about 20 people when I was less than 30. And it just kept growing from there. It was a great experience. I worked at the Software Engineering Institute of Tech for a decade, which is a think tank of the world for how to produce the greatest software. And I've been an independent consultant for the last 10 years. That's it in a nutshell.
There's the journey. So I knew about the dairy farm because I've read the book. And so what you don't know probably is that I also grew up on a farm. My dad grew up on a dairy farm. My grandpa had a dairy farm. We had a hog farm and crops and much, much more. So we have that in common. And I was actually going to ask you about the dairy farm connection. Anything beyond that observation about dad and the data, anything else about that kidhood on a farm that you think has made an impact on your work?
Oh, absolutely. You know, when I went to college, I was like, holy cow, this is easy. When I worked on the dairy farm, I mean, from age 2, there was no difference between life and work. And it was fun. I was in a family of 6 kids plus all the other kids that were around all the time in my family. When I was in high school, my day was this. I'd wake up around 5:30, go do chores. After the chores, I would run to school. I would take a shower, go do my schoolwork. I'd go to track practice afterwards. I'd run home. I'd do chores. And then I'd do homework. And life was good. I enjoyed
Then you
it.
went to college and there's no chores. Like,
it was, oh my God, so much easier. So to me, I really think I learned a lot about work ethic, but also about how to have fun and work at the same time. Because really, my brothers and I and my sisters, we always had fun doing the work. We were working all the time, but we also were having fun all the time. So I really enjoy work still. I like working hard, and I like enjoying the work I do.
excellent. So, the title of the book tells us lead with speed, but beyond what we get from that, what's the big idea of the book?
The big idea comes down to what I call one of the immutable laws of speed. You own the accelerator for the speed of your own work and the work of those you lead. You own the accelerator. Most people do not get, they're a victim. They don't get that they have a power over how the work is done. And if you take control of that and understand it, you can actually increase your speed. That's the big idea.
So, okay, so let's take that apart because everyone who's here, or nearly everyone who's here, is a leader. And that also means they're also a worker, right? Like they're in the middle somewhere. So they're leading and they're on teams as well as leading. And so I'm going to ask this question in two parts. You said we own the accelerator. So as a team member, right, whether that's an individual contributor or a member of a leadership team, what can we do to accelerate progress and change?
Okay. I'll give you two major things. One is know where you're going. And that's a little bit more subtle than you might know. And I'll take that one apart too. Number two is know what speed actually means for you. And I'll take that apart a little. So let's do number one.
Okay.
Know where you're going. Multiple times I've walked into client sites and they give me a list of the problems they want to solve. I remember it vividly once in this research center. Really brilliant people. And they had this list, and I went through the list and I took it apart and I said, okay, this is an observation of how your system works. It's neither good nor bad. Here's basically a whine. You're complaining about how things work. And here's basically a complaint that it's not working and what the results are. But what is your real problem? After we dove through it, they listed a lot of problems. We're not going fast enough. Fast enough to where? What it turns out, their big problem was they weren't innovating, they believed, as fast as their competitors. Their competitors were getting features to the field before they were. I said, okay, we can measure that. How often does that happen compared to how often do you beat them? No idea.
It's just how we feel. We think it's true, Alan.
Yes, we think it's true. Well, let's look at it. So, I've done this in multiple places. Sometimes it turned out they were absolutely right. Sometimes they were beating them to the punch most of the time, and they were pissed off when they missed. So know where you're going. But by the way, getting that clarity of what they needed to do actually made them stop a couple of the improvement initiatives they had going because they had nothing to do with the innovating faster than their competitor, than their quote unquote enemy. Right. We had to focus on what that is. They say genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. My job is to help people sweat faster. They have no shortage of ideas. But the execution, the implementation is where they need to improve the speed of that. Number two, how do you know how fast you're going? Let's take that apart just a little.
Okay.
How do you know? If you are running, maybe you feel better one day than the other day. Maybe that's because you actually went slower. Maybe it's because you ran on a slight downhill. You know, you don't know without having some fundamental measurements of what you're doing. So what I talk about in the book, and I do with most of my clients, is we figure out what their numerator and denominators are that are relevant to speed to value. First part, speed to value. Now let's define what that speed is. And by the way, there's in the business world, there's rarely a direct thing as good as a speedometer, but we can figure things out.
So, so everybody, I won't say everybody, but most organizations today, certainly in many industries, are all saying we need to be able to go faster. So
absolutely,
we inherently better at this, Alan.
You know, I talked about this in chapter 2 of the book, my own personal discovery in actually doing engineering, writing code. For the first time ever, I was taking a course that enabled me to measure my speed. I wasn't happy with it. So what did I do? I tried harder. I didn't do anything different. I tried harder. So what I find is management really, leaders and individuals typically don't have the tools they need to understand how to do things differently and measure that difference. So they try harder. They put more pressure on the teams, or one of the big movements going on right now is the Agile Manifesto in high tech.
Right.
And what they have done with that is a lot of times is they say, okay, we're going to deliver quicker by delivering constant value every 2 weeks or something like that. Then I go into the organizations and I ask, so how much of your sprints, these 2-week cycles, are dedicated to just plain defects fixing? Oh, probably a half to 3/4. There's no value added to that. They're actually ramping up their cost of quality. The more time you spend on trying to make the product good as opposed to creating the product, the slower you're going. But they feel faster because they're running sprints. It's just actually, they're taking a lot longer to get done with the marathon.
Well, there's an important point in there. Is simply the power of language. We call it a sprint, and we talk about it like a sprint, and we're going to go hard for 2 weeks, and so it feels like, oh man, we must have accomplished a lot. But as you're saying, accomplishment there's got to be a numerator and a denominator. It's not just pure work, right? It's output.
Right. It's output. Hey, have you ever watched the ends of marathons on TV or in person?
Yeah.
Have you noticed, like, a lot of times the winner looks easy, and then the people farther back in the pack look like they're suffering?
No doubt about it. That's a rhetorical question, right?
Yeah. So here's the problem in a lot of the high-tech organizations. They're rewarding the people that are suffering because they're sweating harder. They're working harder. Sure looks that way. Well, the people that look effortless are actually doing better work, higher speed to value. And they don't look like it because they have mastery. They've done the proper, like the winners in the marathons, they did the proper training, the proper fundamentals. They got the proper coaching. They did all those things, and they executed flawlessly. And that happens in their workouts, et cetera, as well. So we have to flip a lot of our high-tech organizations to figure out what the value part is, and to really recognize the ones that are going fast and effortlessly, and reward those and start to hold them up as the exemplars. I've had multiple times where they've had cakes and celebrations for people that were working tons of overtime to fix the problems they created.
That's rewarding the wrong behavior. So you know, I know that a lot of your experience, and the book speaks to this too, is around high tech, and you mentioned that several times, and that's great, right? And not everyone who's watching or listening is in high tech, and so do all of these things apply, or how do they apply any differently if we're not writing code, doing high tech stuff? Can you speak to that for a second?
Sure. I've also done work with some non-high-tech places. How about this for anti-high-tech? An organization called Primitive Pursuits. And their job is to connect children with nature. And it's an amazing organization. They get tons of kids from very young to late teens out into the woods, doing amazing things like learning how to start fires, even in a wet environment with no matches, no other tools than the ones they find. How to make bows and arrows out of the things they find, all this kind of stuff. And this organization, really, I helped them redefine what their value proposition was and who they wanted to reach and how they wanted to reach them. They wanted to reach farther, deeper into the community. They wanted to reach out farther. They looked at what in high tech, we're always talking about risk. Now, risk is different in high tech. It could be a risk with a technology domain or things like that. For them, the risk was more based on having access to the right land, having access to land that's close to the center of the city, so the less privileged people for travel can still make it to the land to have those experiences.
Right.
Those were the types of things we looked at there. All the same principles applied. I just had to drop the language, like I didn't talk about cost of quality. I didn't talk about defects. I talked about heart. I talked about vision.
Well, and back to your original point, you said the two things we've got to be thinking about. And I'm glad that you talked about that, because you talked about the two things is, knowing where we're going and what does speed mean to us, right? And so figuring those two things out doesn't have anything to do with what the work itself is, I think would be another way to say.
Absolutely. That's correct.
So
speed to value is so important. What is the value we're trying to achieve?
Gotcha. So you talk a lot about the mind. I mean, I'm a big person, not in the way some people think about it, but to me, before we can get to a skill set, we have to have the right mindset. And so you talk a lot about the speed mindset. So from your perspective, what is the speed mindset, Alan?
First and foremost, I'll say this: trying harder is not enough. You have to do something different. That's one. Number one. Simple. Let me see. Got to think back. Risk. I talk about this in the book. Anything that's important and valuable, the more important and more valuable is, the more it's protected by dragons. Do you remember The Hobbit?
I do. Yep.
Many of your readers probably have, but the gold at the end is protected by a dragon. Anything that's really important and different for your organization is what I say protected by the dragons of risk. So to me, one of the big mindsets is to accept that this is an adventure. That makes sense? This is an adventure. It goes back to my farming thing. Baling hay. Anybody knows what baling hay is? You're pulling a thing that shoots hay bales back into a wagon. You do it differently most of the time now. But I was always in the back of the wagon. I was the youngest. I don't know why I was in the back of the wagon. My brother said it was too hard to drive the tractor. It turns out it wasn't. But they would.
Turns out that you got the job they didn't want, is what you got, Alan. That's just
but we had fun with it. They tried to hit me with the hay bales, and I would actually, try to grab them and stack them up. It was great. It helped my track speed a lot, by the way. Anyway, back to this. So, don't fear the dragon. You got to identify what the risks are. Think how you're going to handle it, and armor up, suit up. Avengers assemble. Be ready for those risks and deal with them. It's really exciting. I'll give one more. I could give a lot, but there's one more. I hope I want to teach all my kids how to drive a standard, because there's a metaphor that I hope everybody gets: shifting gears.
Yep.
To driving a standard for people that might not have done it. You got to actually take your foot off the accelerator, push in the clutch, and shift gears. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get to a higher gear. You're not going to be able to go faster. This is a really important concept. When you're doing any type of project, there's going to be times where you need to shift gears. when you're doing startup, you're going to lead the project differently than when you're getting it going and ramping up to include a lot of other people. You're going to do it differently when you get toward the end and when you're ready to deploy. You got to be able to shift gears, change mindsets, and there needs to be a place where you actually pause everybody and say, we're changing now. So that's one of the things I really teach a lot of my clients is stop doing the same meeting every week. Look at where you are and have every week be an opportunity to shift gears on how you think about the work and how you do the work.
Gotcha.
So there's a big three.
We are talking with Alan Willett, the author of the new book, Lead with Speed, Fire Up Your Team, Power Your Engines of Development, and Make Your Organization Soar. And so when a lot of people, Alan, think about speed, and maybe you hinted at this a little bit just now, but, push down the accelerator, pedal to the metal, all those things. And the next question is, what about burnout? So what about burnout for the leader and the team? What advice or insight do you have for us about avoiding burnout? Or is it automatically going to happen if we're going to lead with speed?
Thank you. That's one of the absolute problems a lot of leaders face, because all the great leaders I know are completely overcommitted. Right? I mean, and they have a lot of ideas. But here's where the burnout comes. The burnout comes on not having control over your engines of speed. So what I really try to get them to do is shift into doing an enlightened personal management, personal project management. And what I mean by that is there's 3 stages to enlightenment. Ready for this? I'll lay it on you.
Okay, I'm ready.
One is they got to master being able to see reality. And what I mean by this is, for just like the burnout factor, it's really just trying to do too much that's beyond the capabilities of you and your team. See what the reality is. See how much there is? Estimate it. I just did this with an individual last week, and they were devastated to see that they had about 40 hours of time available and they had about 300 hours of work. Okay, that's why you're feeling burnt out. So the next part is harder. Accept it. Seeing it is one thing. I've had individuals reject it and say, well, I'll just have to work harder. And burn out faster. That's not my choice. My choice is to accept the reality and then deal with it. And that's where you get to, once you see reality, accept reality, you can deal with it. You can renegotiate with your customers. You can renegotiate with yourself. You also can change how you do the work or what the value is you're going after. There's so many variables you can change that you can get control over this. So to me, leading with speed doesn't mean burnout. Leading with speed means you have control.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir. So I have about 3 more questions for you before we wrap up. The first one has nothing to do with the book, I don't think. And I think you've hinted at this a little bit already, but what do you do for fun, Alan?
Oh, for fun. Well, 1, work. I do enjoy my work. 2 is I really do enjoy physical athletics. I like doing them. I like playing basketball. I like going out running. I like riding. I like going for a run with my son while he rides on the bike and completely toasts me.
Well, you didn't have to be very old to be able to probably do that. Even if you're fast, someone on a bike. You got to deal with reality, Alan. That's the reality of that.
That is reality.
So,
and number 3 is I do enjoy reading a lot.
Which leads to my next question. And if anyone's watching, you can see all of the books on the bookshelf behind Alan. So what's something you've read recently or you're reading right now, Alan?
One is I've read reading the X-Force series with Craig Ellison, which is science fiction. It's an amazingly good series. It's funny, hard science fiction with a couple give-me's. By give-me's, I mean, you have to just accept that some rules of physics might be a little bit defied. But it's a heck of a lot of fun. And on the business side, I really enjoyed Black Box Thinking. It really is a lot about how hard it is to, now that I think about it, how hard it is to see reality, accept reality, and deal with it. It's a whole cultural thing for a whole organization, and the author did a great job with that.
Awesome. So now, where can we learn more about the book and your work? How can people reach out to you? What do you want people to know?
You can find everything out about me and the books and the work I'm doing at alanwillett.com. Alan Willett, WILLETT.com.
There you go. 2 L's, 2 T's, everybody. And so now, everybody, a question for all of you who've been watching and listening, and that is, now what? What are you going to do as a result? So hopefully you've gotten some ideas that might help you lead with greater speed or understand where your bottlenecks might be in your organization. So my challenge to you is to say, what action am I going to take as a result of having been here? Maybe it's something about the mindset pieces we talked about. Maybe it's about understanding what speed really means in your organization. Maybe it means thinking about what the risks are and what's holding your whole organization back. Whatever it is, those just happen to be some of the things that I wrote down on my piece of paper here. But my hope is that you will take some action, because if you don't, what was the point of being here? I mean, yeah, we had some fun and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the only reason you came. You came here to leave with some tools to help you be a more effective leader. And when you take some action, then good things will happen. So, Alan, thanks for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
Kevin, thank you. Thank you for being remarkable.
It was my pleasure, everybody. So before I go, we'd love to have you join the conversation as to what we're doing, get updates on what we're doing. We're changing some stuff about this podcast. We want you to let us know what you think and how you think we should continue to change it. You can do that by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn group for the podcast. Take your favorite location and go there. You can get to both of them by going to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And you can join us there. And while you're on your computer or on your phone, we'd love some feedback. So if tell us how you think this is going and how valuable it's been to you. We'd love your feedback. 5 stars, of course, are great, but we really want to know what you think. Thanks again for being here, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.